Insightful and informative technology talks for the U.S. Defense Industrial Base.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Div Tech Talks. I'm your host, Delia Shilabot, also known as the IT Princess of Power. And today I have the most amazing guest with us. I've got Allison Giddens from WinTech. Allison, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be with us today?
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. My name is Allison Giddens. I'm with WinTech. We are a small business aerospace machine shop located just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I've been in industry for about 17 years. Kind of thrown to the wolves. IT is one of my kind of responsibilities at the business, has been for, 10 years or so now. But about 3 years ago, my business partner and I purchased the business from our mentor and WinTech's founder. So worked here for, a little over a decade and then decided, hey, let's do this officially. So I'm fortunate enough to have a great business partner, and we divide and conquer. I handle a lot of the operations side and he handles a lot of the manufacturing side. And we know just enough about the other's role to be dangerous. So that's
All right.
that's my backstory.
And then your organization, so you are a defense contractor, so you're in the defense industrial base, and you have a compliance requirement for NIST 800-171 currently, and so that means you'll have to certify at level 2 eventually, correct?
That's what we're anticipating. We don't think we're going to luck out to be L1, but we'll see.
So how has that journey been for you so far?
It's been a beast. I think 3 years ago when we all thought, oh gosh, this is, we need to have this done tomorrow. And yeah, NIST 800-171 has been around for quite some time. But when CMMC came to be kind of the talking point of the day, I think there was a notion that you had to be perfect, tomorrow. And the journey as a whole, it's been, looking back on it, it's like, okay, we got there, but we got there through baby steps, and we got there through taking our time and being deliberate with changes that we were making in our environment, because we knew that if we made kind of knee-jerk reactions, they would be fly-by-night. They wouldn't stick. They would be check-the-box kind of security. So that was it's kind of the cliff notes of the past 3
So
or
you,
4
you
years.
said some things in there that I think are really interesting and valuable that I'd like to highlight. The first is that you said you took baby steps. And so I agree, even as an IT person myself, when I look at that and recognize there are so many changes you have to make, it is overwhelming. So how did you decide like what the process would be so that you figured out even like what are the baby steps that my organization has to take? How did you do that?
Well, it was really daunting at first. It was the thought or the notion that, okay, where do you start? It was You could get easily distracted. You'd start with one task and say, okay, I really need to focus on this piece of security. And then if I do that, then I need to do this over here. And then you find that, like many of my days, I feel like you do a lot, but you don't actually get anything done. So I kind of, how that is. So I think what was the most successful for us was when we looked at something and said, okay, what is something we can do right now that we'd have the biggest bang for our buck? So if that was, for example, turning on MFA for certain programs and applications, yes, that takes no real quote effort, depending on your applications and where you're using it. But there is a piece of cultural change that has to be made too. The last thing you want to do is hit the button and then send an email out to your employees saying, hey, guess what? Tomorrow morning, you're going to have to do this now. So there's a little piece of, you have to be deliberate, you have to be intentional with these little changes. So that, to us, that we had the most success when we'd kind of take
All right,
those
so
kind
like
of baby steps.
really strategically thinking about the impact of the organization, and then, like prioritizing those changes. I love that.
Yes,
The
exactly.
other thing that you said that I thought was really interesting, because it's one of the things I like to talk about, was that you were not interested in just checking a box. You recognize that you're going to do a lot of work and a heavy lift anyway, and that you should extract as much value out of that and understand we're really implementing a lot of measures that are securing the company. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that real quick.
Sure. Yeah. So it was less to us about implementing, control 3.1 point. It was less about that, and it was more about, okay, what security measures can we take now that are going to help WinTech, and then in turn, what does that just happen to check the box on for compliance? And then I think that if you prioritize that way, you'll find that you just by chance get compliant on things by focusing on the
I love that
security piece
approach.
first.
Well, also because I love security, but
Touched your heart, yes. That was
uh,
deep.
so so you said that like, internally, like you're tasked with IT. So did you do this all yourself, or did you get any help?
I would love to say I did it all myself. That would be really impressive. No, I did not. We had hired an MSP several years ago to help with day-to-day support, just in general. And I was very upfront with them from the get-go and said, look, they're talking about this thing called CMMC, NIST 801. So here's all the stuff. We don't know if MSPs are going to have to be compliant before the business they support will have to be compliant. We don't know any of those answers, but here's what we're looking at. And they were very, very cool with us and said, yeah, we're not interested in that. We're going to stay commercial based. And so they told us, all right, we'll give you X amount of months to kind of find someone who knows what they're doing in this space, and then we'll hand things over. So I feel very fortunate that we had that kind of open line of communication where we were able to identify an MSP in the space who was terrific and still is terrific, and we were able to transition pieces over. And right off the bat, that MSP helped us to prioritize a lot of the bigger things that we had not been able to really dive into ourselves. And then
That's
the rest is
awesome.
history.
I mean, that's really fortunate. First of all, that the first provider was you were transparent with them and that they were honest back with you. Because I think that you've shared with me in the past that some organizations are not quite as transparent and honest, showing up and claiming to be able to be, really good and expert. We can get you compliant next week, things like that. So, I mean, if so you're lucky to have a great provider, but if, for our friends out there who need to make a selection or even to assess the suitability of who they're working with right now, what kind of tips would you give them? Like, what kind of process should you follow?
Tough. It's tough because you get attracted to these. Ooh, look at this. Supposedly they're the top 5 best rated MSP. It's like who does that? There's no MSP Yelp. So who does this? So I think that there are some good steps that a small business can take when they're identifying an MSP. And first is obviously don't get overwhelmed. Yeah, that's easier said than done. There's a great shopping guide that I helped to put together with the National Defense Information Sharing and Analysis Center, NDISAC, and it's a free document. It's shared to the DIB as a whole, and a bunch of small businesses put it together with some support and some insights from some MSPs in the space too. And the questionnaire is basically a list of basic risk assessment questions that you might want to ask a potential MSP, because there's a piece of risk sharing that's going to take in effect when you hire an MSP, even if it's for day-to-day IT support, or maybe it's just for a temporary project support and getting you up to CMMC speed, and then perhaps that is handed off to someone internally for IT support. However that looks, ultimately you're still going to have to agree that you're sharing some risk inherently. So I would start there. Start with resources that are out there that are good, that can vet. Don't take the first ad off of LinkedIn that says that, act now and they get you compliant in 2 weeks. If you see anyone telling you exactly what it's going to take to get you compliant without actually knowing your environment, run far away and
That's very
scream.
wise. That's very wise because they don't know anything about you and everyone's environment is different. All right. So, do you have any final words of advice or anything that, if you're speaking to like the thousands of your peers, a message to leave them about this process and getting help and becoming successful with CMMC compliance?
I think the key is knowing your environment. So even if you know for a fact you're not going to be the one responsible for managing it, you need to know what it is that you're handing over. And a lot of times that can be found just by following your data. So manufacturers in the space, for example, we are all very familiar with ISO 9001 and AS 9100, and we have process data flows. So take that, it's a resource that's you've already got. Take that and follow your data flow, and then see, okay, if the data flow is this way, that's your environment. That is going to be essentially what your MSP or what your IT group, or project planner, management, IT, whoever's covering your NIST 800-171 or your CMMC or anything really security related, it's all going to center on the data. So use the resources you have, use the resources that are out there, and yeah, I think that would be the advice I'd give just about
Awesome.
anybody.
Thank you, Allison, for coming on today and sharing some wisdom so that everyone can be as successful as WinTech has been. And for the rest of you out there, see the link in summary below so that you can check out that shopping guide that Allison helped to develop. And thank you all for joining us today.